pentagram dedicated to Henry Rollins. In the years of the primal force and the dawn of terrestrial birth, man mastered the mammoth.
Make his fight on the early day, constant chill deep inside. Good afternoon, good morning, good whatever, good whomever. Episode 104 of Agitators Anonymous. The train keeps rolling, etc., etc. I'm Alan Averill, the singer in a heavy metal band. Here with some social commentary, some random this, that, and the other. Episode 104. Yes, indeed, I didn't start season 2. Who knows, will I ever start season 2? I don't know. Difficult to tell. Well, there was a 1-2 of video chats over on my YouTube channel with Cathy Rowan and then Mikko from Swallow the Sun. And generally, the reaction to both of those has been really great. Both interviews threw up some, I think, genuine prospects for sort of follow-on episodes of the podcast. I'm definitely interested in exploring the themes around how this, let's call it this new folk scene, took hold in society. And I think the idea that its path to popularity comes from such a different place as the traditional elements of the music industry, that there's something really interesting to be explored there. And about how I think it's pretty safe to say that gaming has just roundly trounced the music industry in terms of the attention span of young people, what they spend their money on, and the simple fact that just games themselves outsell music exponentially. So if you can find yourself a niche of a kind of music that people who game want to listen to while gaming, or music that is interactive with the game or part of the gaming itself. And this is one of the reasons why traditional metal and rock, it's why during my chat with Cathy Rowan, I think I must have seemed like some sort of dinosaur on some level, or maybe not. The simple fact is that this music and its path to popularity has almost entirely circumvented the traditional methods of the music industry, and it is a really interesting prospect. However, I'm not going to get into that just yet. What I'm going to do, seeing as the last crusade to doomsday, or whatever we have called our tour with Swallow the Sun in Rome, is about to start this Friday, and lots of people are asking me questions about touring, simple stuff just like, what do you do every day? How do you cope? I mean, really, in the grand scheme of things, and some of the things that people in this world are coping with right now, coping with being on tour is not the most difficult thing, but it has its moments here and there. You do get the odd dark night of the soul. How do you cope with that? What's the difference between van touring? What's the difference between nightliner touring? What are the new costs you can expect touring? What are the costs that I think are going to be unloaded onto you as the listener? What are the prospects for the music industry going ahead in a post-pandemic? We hope, certainly not post-war economy yet. I did this podcast a few weeks ago, which maybe went a bit under the radar, as it was the first of the Tuesday podcasts. As I said before, Tuesday will be kind of more about music, the music industry. At least I'm going to try and make it that. Post some of those chats I've had with Addy about various bands, Addy from Solstafir, this, that, and the other, and make Friday the more social commentary, even though this particular podcast is coming out on the Friday. But the idea that many people have been asking me questions coming up to this tour. What is your approach? How do you handle all this post-COVID information? What do you think is smoke and mirrors? What do you think is really going to happen? All this kind of stuff. So I'm going to discuss touring. How does a tour begin? What is the genesis of the idea? What are some of the simple basic mathematics? Now, I'll probably butcher some of them, of course, as I'm just the singer, but having some experience of course, being a booking agent as well. I work for Dragon Productions, a booking agent in Germany. Well, work is maybe a strong word for that title, but I do something or other there. Some form of minor agitation. But that is, of course, the name of the podcast. Right. Well, so first things first. If you're out there and you're running a small uranium mining facility, maybe you're mining coltan, maybe you want to, open up a basement bar that only plays the first Joy Division record and you need some sponsorship. Maybe you've got a tattoo shop to be a bit more serious, all that kind of stuff. Maybe you want to promote your band. I don't know. 2 podcasts a week. There are openings for potential sponsors and a captive audience, whether they like it or not, of thousands and thousands. And I'm getting thousands and thousands of listens as well every week. Although it must be said that I'm pretty sure the algorithm counts a listen if you listen for more than 10 seconds. And it seems some people don't get through the intro. Well, what can I do about that? Anyway, the hostest with the mostest. Indeed. So, without further ado, the podcast is sponsored by metalblade.com. If you're in North America, use the promo code ALAN and you can get 10% off your order. Personally, I've been binging on the first 4 Cannibal Corpse records again. I used to like them quite a lot back in the day, but moved away from that chunky sort of gory death metal. But recently started listening again to The Bleeding, an album that sort of passed me by as I wasn't really interested in it at the time. And really reveling at the incredible artwork of Butchered at Birth and Tomb of the Mutilated. My God, they really pushed the ante back in those days, didn't they? I suppose some of this was inspired by this curious roundtable death metal chat that involved Corpse Grinder, and then had this amazing response from Chris Barnes about how much he hates the modern death metal scene. Well, I don't know if you've listened to the new 6 Feet Under. But anyway, if you have, then your case is probably well and truly rested. Anyway, yes, you can use that promo code. And for the record, yeah, Butchered at Birth. Went back to it. Been enjoying it. Maybe it's about time you had another listen to that. You can follow me on the Instagram, _Primordial, Primordial_official. So, as I said before on the podcast, and maybe you might want to go back and have a listen to it, but how does a war economy change touring? Well, I think you've probably noticed, I mean, everyone probably has in the West, and, well, I say the West, I mean, I presume it's probably a knock-on effect everywhere. But certainly, the cost of everything, every aspect of life is now going through the roof. We've been, during the pandemic, had all these doom and gloom predictions of energy supply shortages, of food shortages, and this and that and the other. And one of those shortages simply now might be because things are just too bloody expensive. I mean, there's many normal things which have just risen in cost 20, 30, 40, 50%. Is all this because of the war in Ukraine? Is every aspect of life now has a knock-on effect from the war? And what is price gouging? That's another thing. I've been using that phrase quite a lot. It's because I like the word gouge, quite like I've also been enjoying the word inertia lately. What does that mean? Well, I suppose it's a form of, not passing on savings to your customers. Maybe you get some form of financial recompense granted you by the state as a sector, and you don't pass it on to your customers. It's a kind of, if everyone else is doing it, well, why shouldn't we? Attitude to your sector of business. Landlords see what others are charging and think, well, rather than consider words like equity or fairness, or even linking, for example, the cost of rent to inflation or whatever else, they gouge the market because they have all the cards. And therefore, you are not going to have a place to live. Pretty simple. I guess it's kind of like going to an airport and everything is more expensive than a normal shop. Is there any reason for that? No real reason, other than that you are a captive audience and you have no choice but to pay over the odds in those places. Now just expand the same logic pretty much to everywhere else. So what is directly attributable to this war footing or not is open to question. But certainly we can all find, the insane price markups Big Pharma has been charging governments for everything, and everything as a very significant signpost to this sort of age we're about to step into, where it certainly feels that people are just simply being priced out of life. Don't I sound like the grand socialist? Well, hey, listen, if the hat fits and all that kind of thing, that's all this is said. The trillions of dollars printed and poured into the economy during the pandemic they have to have some effect, right? More money was printed or something in the last year or two than had been printed in the previous history of the Federal Reserve, as I understand it. And so I suppose it's very simple. What goes up must come down. What is the worth of money if so much of it is pressed? Is pressed. Well, I'm going to get on to vinyl pressing now in a moment, so I suppose that's why it's on my mind. It is certainly worth far less. Your savings are certainly worth far less than they were 5 years ago, but isn't that the point of owning nothing and being happy? Well, I guess we shall see. But these trillions of dollars that have been pressed, God damn it, I did it again. I suppose it's because we're going to talk about touring at some stage. I can see clearly, having looked at the costings over the past month or two for this tour we're about to start on Friday, that the cost of a nightliner, which at one stage used to sit around, let's say 800, 900,000 euro a day, is moving well beyond that, 1,400 euros a day or more. You're being charged almost 150, 200, 250 more a day for petrol, for all those kind of other costs. Oh, it's breakfast. God damn it. There was a Johnsonian sort of slip up if ever there was one. Breakfast. Let's get breakfast done. Oh, it's Brexit. Or it's X other thing. The war in Ukraine, everything else. But of course, you know human nature. Maybe it's simply not all of those things happening at the same time. That everyone is trying to get back out there to normal life. And for the music industry, this means touring. Or at least for our sector of the music industry. I.e. people with guitars, I suppose. The old-fashioned view of the industry. So when you have a captive audience, this is when you raise your stakes, right? Because people have no alternative to pay these costs. As I said before, way back, insurance costs. I think I said this in a podcast maybe a year and a half ago, that insurance costs are going to go way up. And I've heard through the grapevine that some companies are charging festivals so much money now for insurance that these festivals are not going to go ahead. At least they won't go ahead in 2023. And certainly if something is or was to happen this summer's festival season, I think we are in a last station situation before the train heads out of the burbs and into the wilderness. Certainly another year of cancelled shows and festivals would be disaster. But thankfully, looking at the news from within the touring sector, there are only a few regional areas that are left clinging to the authoritarian pantomime of the last vestiges of the pandemic. Thankfully, only a few. So, what does the discussion look like while gearing up for a tour after so long? Like I said, I'm going to ramble across a few different things, a few different ideas about how a tour begins, all that kind of stuff. So, a kind of pre-tour ramble, if you will. So, what does this discussion look like while gearing up for a tour after such a long time? Well, it kind of goes a bit like this. The first rule of Fight Club is don't discuss Fight Club, right? So, my advice, and the advice I have been given and would give to any bands out there about to head out on tour: act like the pandemic is yesterday's news. In fact, maybe act like it never happened at all. One false positive test can sink your entire tour. So if you have one vaguely hypochondriac member of your band, or someone who has some fears and nerves they want to calm, you might have to tell them they may have to find another way rather than skip off to the chemist that morning and come back with a false positive, because this will sink your entire tour. My advice: pretend it's 1977 or 1987 or 1997 or whatever decade you want. Don't offer any info you aren't asked for, and get on with the job. You aren't in the risk category? Well, that is, unless you're a septuagenarian touring band, but I would imagine then you probably won't be listening to this podcast, and if you are, you're probably asking yourself, who is this goddamn fool? Well, you'd be right to ask that question, but like I said, I've been on many tours where I've become sick. I've had head colds that have felt like somebody's been standing in my head for an entire week. Suffered through this, that and the other for your art, so to say. So that's kind of my advice that I would give to people, and the advice that has been sort of said to me from people who are out on the road at the moment, which is just keep your head down, day to day, take it, and don't do anything particularly foolish. And those foolish things can, of course, mean, I suppose, jeopardizing the process of the whole tour. Take the information how you see fit, but not to be foolish. Keep your tour bubble a bit like that, a bit bubbly. Well, that doesn't make any sense as a word. What I mean by that is I think that your band, your tour entourage, whatever you have, you kind of keep yourself to yourself. Maybe this is the tour where you don't do a massive stage dive into the crowd with no top on, ask to be carried to the bar, fill up your glass, pass it around for everyone to take a swig, and then French kiss and fondle your way back to the stage. Maybe this isn't the tour for doing those things. So keep your Kanye West-like entourage to yourself would seem to be the most prudent advice. And the first rule of Fight Club is don't talk about Fight Club, right? I have a few other observational cultural, what could we call them? Observational cultural housekeeping moments before I rattle on. As predicted, it took about 3 weeks before the Ukraine situation faded off the top spot in people's attention spans. And the news cycle, of course, you know, Biden does his best to keep it up there with his gaffes, or are they gaffes? And some of the news coming from places like Mariupol is insanely brutal. I have some friends working on the borders of Ukraine, helping refugees, people fighting, people trying to simply survive, who have been retelling to me stories of atrocities, rapes, mass graves, indiscriminate massacres, and all the darkest moments of conflict that usually unfold. And while the greatest humanitarian crisis in Europe unfolds, the same people who, proclaim themselves experts on COVID, who are screaming about placing the unvaccinated in camps, who quickly pivoted their strategy over Ukraine and adopted it would seem weird, hawkish, pro-war takes, then sat back down into the sewer whence they came, giving us all hot takes about the Oscars and whatever that was. Even I somehow had to view that. This is where we are, living in a culture driven by hot takes as everyone forces and pushes their way to the front of the queue, trying to accumulate the attention income. Trying to get clicks, trying to get eyes on whatever their hot take is. And you realize that kind of doesn't matter to some people, whether it's, as I said, a massacre in Mariupol, followed by a TikTok dance for Zelensky, to mansplaining US geopolitics, calling for a no-fly zone when you don't really understand what it is. It's all par for the course. And these folks who were a few months ago screaming at you for not wanting their grandparents to die, or even their parents to die, on what sort of animal were you for not wearing a mask outside, etc., not taking your this, that, and the other, not following orders of big pharma and technocratic, authoritarian kleptocrats, are now playing hard and fast with the concept of short-range ballistic nuclear weapons. Well, experts on everything we all seem to be in Yoda speak. Was that really, was that needed? I don't know. I felt I had to get it off my chest. And it is, after all, called Agitators Anonymous, is it not? So, how does a tour happen? Like I said, this is just a really simple question. And many people ask me this. They say, they used to say this a lot. Oh, you're on a label now. Do they help organize tours? So the quick answer to that is no. These days, really signing to a label for a band is a stepping stone. I'm going to do a podcast about the difference between being in a band now and, for example, other decades. But the reality is that a musician now needs to be a mix of TV presenter, social media curator, content creator, video editor, among many other things. Of course, you don't have to be. You can completely do whatever you want and sign to Northern Heritage and never have a phone if you wish. And if that is your modus operandi, I am very, very jealous. Believe you me, I would much rather just be a musician. Of course, I would much rather be a musician who is just able to make a living from playing music, but that is pretty much impossible. But, as I said, all the things that you were required to be, a label won't touch you without having the building block of social media to jump off from. So this is my advice I would give to young bands. Try and sort some of those things out and have those building blocks in place, because a label will come and say, well, okay, the music is great, but what do we use as the first rung on the ladder of promotion? How do we give you a leg up? And reality is you have to create that sort of ladder yourself. And let's be clear, we're talking here about above the sort of remit of total underground. But without any of those building blocks, I think you can largely forget it. And let's be clear, none of that work pays. No one is going to give you any financial reward for the promo you put in to gain followers. Certainly all musicians saw clearly what streaming was worth to them when the pandemic was in full swing, and all they could do was really take stock and look at a screen and were not able to get out there and play. And the answer was, well, nothing really much. So maybe some of you saw Jack White, who I like a lot, talking about his vinyl pressing plant he built and calling out the major labels for basically monopolizing the pressing of vinyl. It's a little clip on YouTube worth having a look at as he discusses the sort of vinyl pressing record shop that he's made. And he makes a very, very good point. And he calls out the major labels for basically monopolizing the pressing of vinyl, telling them to finally go and build your own pressing plants. And he's correct. From the finishing master of an album to finally holding the vinyl in your hand can take almost a year now. At least 8, 9, 10 months. The pressing plants are running on overtime, and how they are going to be affected by the rising costs of petrol. I mean, that's where vinyl comes from, right? What it's made from. The costs are going to go up and up and up, and that vinyl that cost you maybe €22 is now going to be €32 or €42. These are things that are just inevitable, and I think the same thing happened in the early 1970s. But from the handing in your finished master of an album to finally holding the album in your hand can take a year. So first things first, touring is best when you have a new album in the can. And like I said, touring is not really something that the label does for you. The label is more or less like a stepping stone for you. And if you're lucky enough or of a size enough to have a booking agent, then these are the first steps towards going on tour. You don't always need to have a new album out, but it does help. For example, this tour at the weekend that starts in theory, and we have no new album out, but sometimes you are able to do 1 or 2 or 3 tours from one album cycle. But anyway, I digress. So let's say you finish your album now. It is April the 4th, and you think, okay, next spring, 2023, I want to go on tour. So you think to yourself, well, who else is in the same cycle as us? What other bands are releasing an album at the end of the year, at the start of the year? Who else could we pair up with? If you know other bands, you begin to put a few feelers out, talk to your booking agent, and the idea starts to brew. Maybe it comes from a random messenger conversation. Maybe it's somebody you met and had a beer with and thought, we should go on tour together. That's sometimes how the simplest ideas are born. But very often it's the booking agents trying to, place several bands on the same agency together, or if they have another agency they work with. So first things first, touring is, like I said, best when you have a new album out. So let's say you finish yours now, you're looking for, it's going to be released in maybe a year. What does a booking agent do? Well, that's a kind of complicated question, I suppose. But in theory, the booking agent is the person who will take on a band because they see a worth in them, so to speak. One of my first things I say to bands when they say to me, would you be able to book us? And I say, a percentage of nothing is nothing. Have you ever been paid for a show? And I don't mean just the one in your city. Does anyone ever pay for you to travel? And then you get a fee afterwards. If the answer is no, then a booking agent is not going to take you unless they are, we call them fanagers, as in fans and managers, and they want to do all the work to try and lift the band up. But very often this sort of workload is left to you as a musician to try and do the legwork to get to a place where you have a fee, which is maybe €400, €500 for a show. But if you think about it like this, if you have a fee of €500 at a 10% commission to a booking agent, this is worth €50 before tax. And a band who has a fee of €500 or €5,000 is still the same amount of work that you have to do to get them from point A to point B. You still have to put the same amount of work into organising them, fixing their riders, arranging not only, of course, the flights, but the shuttle from point A to point B, who picks them up, what are the hotel rooming situations, if you're able to have such a thing. And the reality is that because flights are going up and up and up and up, which of course is another knock-on effect of the war economy and the energy emergency, but we're going to talk about that a little bit as we go on. The reality is that a percentage of nothing is nothing. And so you have to try and get yourself to a place where you have some kind of a fee to make a booking agent interested. And then what they do is they basically just start to, pimp the band out. See, what is your worth? Is there any festivals that want you? They're collecting their contacts. They're sending out their mass mailing list kind of ideas, which, let's be honest, have a tiny, tiny click-through rate and are nearly always unsuccessful. But the more profile your band has, the more maybe people want to book you. Take the two Take the two people I just spoke to in my last two podcasts, Cathy Rowan and Swallow the Sun. Now, they are both desirable for a booking agency for two completely different reasons. Swallow the Sun, because they have very good online streaming numbers. They tour a lot. They've built up a following through lots of hard graft and hard work. And even though on the face of it, I suppose they're a band who don't have a huge profile compared to other bands, they pull more. They pull more people than those bands. Like I said, they may not be a cult band, they may not be this, that and the other, but what they do have is a very solid fan base, very good monthly listenership, and a very strong, hard touring ethic. And so they've built up through hard graft a following. Whereas Cathy Rowan, for example, is part of a cultural zeitgeist or a cultural movement that people will want to go and see for different reasons. And so therefore, her background is not hard graft touring. It's of being part of this, I suppose, this cultural zeitgeist, this groundswell movement, this new folk music. So if she decides she has a new album or wants to get booked, people will go and see her, and she can probably get herself booked into strange and different venues. And, you know, her overheads are probably smaller. She has less musicians, etc., etc. But both of the people I spoke to in my last two podcasts are desirable for a booking agency to work with for very different reasons, but yet at the same time, as I said, a percentage of nothing is nothing. If your fee is €500 to a booking agent who takes 10%, that's worth €50. So very often many bands, they feel that once they've signed to a label or signed to a booking agency, the hustling is done. But believe me, the hustling has to be done in tandem or in cooperation or along with the record label. You have to kind of be mutually beneficial to each other. So I never stop hustling for Primordial or doing work or doing this or whatever. That sort of task is never done. It feels obviously very tiresome at times, and there are members of the band who take a backseat to all that stuff, and that's fair enough. We all have our different jobs. But what you are trying to do, I suppose, is just keep the train rolling, keep the momentum moving on some description. And this is unfortunately how bands get tied into, as the CAO, Mr. Eck of Spotify said, the album is dead, you need to release something every month. And unfortunately, that seems to be the way that the algorithm moves, etc., etc. So if everybody is on the same page instead of hustling together, whether it's an active band, an active booking agency, and an active label, bands can take a step up. And so the gestating idea of the tour starts, well, somebody goes, well, spring 2023, who else is out then? Who else is able to tour? And so you might talk to another band, you go, oh, we should tour together. Then the wheels start moving. Sometimes, as I said, the bands are from the same agency, same country, or they have the same time schedule. Sometimes the agents have the ideas and the release schedules meet. So the agency then fixes the time frame. They say, okay, Primordial, you're able to tour, let's say, from February the 1st to February the 20th, 2023. Who else is around? Grand Magus, are you around? Rotting Christ, are you around? Who is able to agree to this time frame? And let's be clear about this task. This task becomes more and more difficult as bands are not professional anymore and they don't have the time off they did or they used to. And if they're of a certain age, they have other life responsibilities, of course. So the idea that you can just get in the van like you did, in 1983, oh, why can't any bands tour like Metallica used to back in the day? And you go, well, society was just very different. I think people weren't saddled with huge debts. The average, I suppose, personal income in the 1970s showed a level of growth that is not reflected in society. People's wages have stagnated for, a decade, 2 decades now. But so there are always very mundane financial concerns that are the backbone of touring. It unfortunately pours an awful lot of cold water on the rock and roll theorization that many people feel is, the driving force behind touring, but that really, really isn't it. There are reasons why things are a little bit more complicated. And in 2023, one of those reasons is, yes, indeed, that the pressures upon musicians to have to do many other different things, and of course, work other jobs, etc., are profound. There are very, very, very few professional bands anymore. So, as bands are, as I said, not really professional, they don't have the time off they used to. Although, like I said, at the rate people are deciding there's no point in having a job anymore, as nothing is affordable on any level, maybe this will have an effect in a while. So if you do manage to find the time and you agree and your schedules can cross-reference and it seems to make sense and you match everyone up, of course, saying to someone, hey, right now we're negotiating a tour that might happen in October 2023. And for a lot of people, trying to make plans in a job that doesn't even have job security for that long or doesn't even have a pension, obviously, or anything like that. Planning for, hey, where are you going to be in 18 months? Well, I don't know. That depends on Putin pressing the button, doesn't it? Or whatever else. But that's the way you have to plan. You have to plan for this far ahead because there are so many people trying to do the same thing. There's so much pressure on venues. And it is a very difficult thing to say, hey, do you know in 18 or 19 or 20 months that you're going to be able to have the time of work to do this kind of thing? So hence why many bands have stand-in members, have other people helping them out. Okay, so let's say you do manage to find the time in theory. You match everyone up. Okay, for 2 weeks. So you say to the agency A and agency B, all right, let's just say for our argument's sake, they're both bands are from agency A. Agency A then goes, all right, so we have the X and Y's, the X's and the Y's, the name of the two bands. So they put them together. They send out a mass mail to all of the venues they know, A, B, C division markets. Don't forget, if your city is an A division market, it means you're a capital city. You probably get the weekends. And B probably means you get Wednesday, Thursday, or Sunday. If you're C, you probably get Monday or Tuesday or Sunday. Depends on the city or the country. But if you are a Paris or whatever, probably you're going to get the weekend. So let's say the X's and the Y's. Okay. The booking agency sends out the contacts, all their contacts, and they start to get the offers back. Start to get the offers. Which one makes most sense geographically, financially? So let's take a tour that can work at 200 people a night, which is not the norm. Most tours happen, to be honest, to between 15 and 75 people a night. Most tours, which is where you just really play for merch and you've got to get to the next show and pay for itself. Get in the van mentality. Actually, if any of you have not read Henry Rollins Get in the Van, I read it for the first time last week, and I'd say for the most part, even though he's a grumpy old curmudgeon, it's pretty exciting. It's really worth, I listened to it on an audiobook, which is read by Henry Rollins himself. And really good. I would recommend that. Anyway, so the agent offers the 2-band bill to the local bookers and the venues. They pay more for weekends and they pay less for weekdays. The local guy has to consider. The local booking agent has to consider. What did the band get last time? What's my estimation of their worth in my market? Let's say last time around was 3 years ago. Do they have a new album out yet or not? Oh, they do. It's coming out with a new album. Okay. They had 174 people last time. Do I sense they're more popular or less popular now? At €20 a ticket. So if the tour is being offered, for example, at €1,500 for a Tuesday night to you, and you're pricing that at €15 a ticket, then you need 100 customers to break even, right? Pretty simple mathematics. Of course, I'm making it more simplistic. Let's say the venue hire is €500. All other costs come to €250, whether that's a promo or maybe you got to hire a drum kit or something, which, is unlikely, but you never know. So let's simplify it like that. So we get to $250 or $2,500 costs. So your break even goes up from 100 people to 175 people, 150 people. So, as I said, this makes the break even now, if the cost is $250, 150 people at €15, which seems doable. Well, it depends. Of course, on many things. Maybe this time around their album isn't as popular. It doesn't get as good reviews. They only bring out 224 people, so you've hit a loss. But if they get 248 people, yeah, but then you've made a couple of €100. So it's kind of, there's a lot of gambling that's involved in this. But at €15, your 150 people break-even point, it seems reasonable. But this depends on, of course, many things. Of course, other than that simple math. Let's take Germany. Bremen, north of Hamburg, is maybe considered a B market, not an A market. Hamburg is the A market. But maybe the booker in Hamburg thinks, well, this band have played here too many times. They're saturated. And they didn't do so well last time. And the new album isn't received very well. But in Bremen, the band have never played. So maybe the people there who won't travel down to Hamburg might go, oh. And we've shown up to play gigs we thought were B markets and got 300 or 400 people, way more than expected. So they come back with an offer of €2,500 for a show on a Wednesday. As we say, the booking agent then considers, where are the guys the night before? Or the girls the night before? Or whoever they are. Where are they the night before? Preferably 300 to 600 kilometres away before the drives get crazy after that. If they're 700, 800, 900 euro or kilometres. Which often happens anyway. But so he thinks, oh, okay, €2,500. Okay, not a bad offer. 10-15% commission off the top. Nightliner, for example, is €1,250. The tour will have costs such as equipment hire, backline hire. This could be €250 a night, maybe even 300. The crew are usually on 150 up to €250 a day. So you're going to need a front of house, someone doing the sound, someone doing the merch, maybe. And so all these costs suddenly very quickly will reach that €2,500 mark. The agent, as I said, has got his commission off the top. And so this means that very quickly a €2,500 offer for a show. Let's say I just saw a tour today, Niall and Crizzy on touring Europe, which I would imagine most of the offers are often in and around this €1,500 to €3,000 mark, maybe a little bit more in some places. So very quickly your €2,500 can disappear. So the musician's fee might only be a couple of €100 left, maybe even less. So their musician's fee can often just be the merch. Of course, if you can pull 150 plus people, 200, 250, then this is great. You begin to make a profit on those terms. That's very small profit, but some kind of profit. If you've got less than 150, 125 people, the chances are you're in a van, not a nightliner. But the money disappears quickly. As always, shit runs downhill. So all the costs end up being usually placed on the musicians to handle. Anything that goes wrong, anything that needs fixing, anything that breaks on the van, by and large, you're going to have to pay for it, usually with your merch money. Any bribes you need to throw to... that does happen in some countries, but we'll gloss over that and swiftly move on. If you're pulling less than 150 people a night, at one time in 2005, you could probably still justify a nightliner, but not really anymore. Any less than 125 people a night, and you're looking at vans, small vans, backline packed in the van, everyone sleeping shoulder to shoulder or in the crawl space above all the gear. People sleeping in hostels or people's floors, exactly as Henry Rollins describes in Get in the Van, the Black Flag Tour Diaries. Although it must be said that he constantly refers to in the Get in the Van book to venues that they're playing to 600, 700, 800, 1,000 people, but never having any money. Makes you wonder who the hell went off with all of the money. Certainly, they don't seem to have made any money in the band. Anyway, I'm sure there's some addendum to the Get in the Van diaries which discusses which member of Black Flag stole all the money. Maybe you can tell me in the comments. It's the first time I've said that in 104 episodes. Anyway, the van tour, wherever that can be super long drives. I've done these tours with Dread Sovereign. They're great, but they're very different. You're basically merch hustlers, and you need to go from the stage to the merch stand and get moving on shifting some shirts. But the reality is most bands don't pull 300 plus people a night. Not anymore anyway. There once was a time when bands could pull easily 800, 1,200, 1,500 people back in the early 90s. They certainly aren't doing the same thing anymore. The reality is most bands don't pull 300 plus people a night. And the way things are going, we can see, I can see going to a show will become a luxury. Shirts are going to be 25, 30, 35 euro. Tickets will become 30, 35, 40, 45 euro as the cost is passed on from, the entire music industry to the customer, to the people who are showing up. And everything is going to become more expensive on those terms. And there's no doubt about it. As everyone tries to make something or other, this is what's going to happen. So let's be practical. A tour pulling 75 or less a night, no one will really make anything unless they sell some shirts. Or they're working on the tour, paying themselves for driving or hiring off the top of a small fee. And those small van tours could survive on 30, 40 people a night if, for example, the booking agency or owned the van, owned the back line. And you could do that on a 400, 500, 600 euro a night basis. 40 people show up, they have, they drink something at the bar, and there's a small profit to be made for small venues or squats or the van drivers or whoever else, the small agencies. So a 50 people a night tour 5 years ago could work, but that was at a time when oil was very cheap per barrel. Now, I don't know if that's going to be possible, and that's going to remove, I suppose, the guts and glory, get in the van element of touring if things just keep, the cost of that, doing that, just keeps rising exponentially. You can see how that will kind of kill off touring. Once upon a time, as I said, the van tour could survive on 500 euro a night. I think that's probably not going to happen anymore. So consider from that 500 euro, somewhere on the small van tour, you've got to have somewhere to stay, petrol to the next show, have to come from that. So 75 people or so. If you're pulling 75 people and you're on a van tour, you're probably running at a very small profit. You might make something, but once you hit 125 and you want to move to a nightliner or 150, you won't make any money really until you can realistically begin to push 200 plus, 250 a night. But to make anything worth really talking about, then we're going to have to break out into 400 plus people a night. But you know as well as I do, this is rare, right? Once upon a time, Ryanair changed the game, and you could fly in and out for a weekend festival show and bring the whole band to Germany. For example, in 2005 or 2008 even, for sometimes 500, 600, 700, 800, 900 euro from Dublin. This slowly became 1,200, this slowly became 1,400, and now I think it's pretty clear we're looking at very often costs of 400 to 550 euro for that return flight now, each person, before we even talk about guitars. Again, petrol, oil, back to the same conversation about energy. This is something that can easily cost 500 euro a flight once you add in guitars. So we return back to what your fee is. If you're a band with a 500 euro fee, that's how much your band is worth, but you have to fly in for the show. Who the fuck is going to pay 2,250 euros of worth of flights for a band whose fee is worth a quarter of that? You can see the problem. Again, it all ties into this idea of local living that we are being forced, or at least the conversation throughout the pandemic was being forced upon people. The idea that, see the world from behind your screen with your metoculars or your metaverse binoculars. Why do you need to go anywhere? Live, work, die within the same 5-kilometer radius, i.e. the implementation of a form of feudal system. But anyway, if you want to go back over the previous 100 episodes, you can find all that kind of thing. However, this is all reflected in the fees for musicians, or rather, is this all reflected in fees for musicians and bands rising to meet all the new rates? Well, of course, no, not really. For huge bands, yeah. Just like the major labels, they tend to monopolize the huge fees they charge festivals. And you might not be aware, but most festival headliners charge between 100 and 250,000 euro for that show. So take a look at Hellfest and cast your glances up to the top fees, and you're talking about 200 to 350,000 euro. Nobody's supposed to really talk about that, but it's true. I'm not going to say the names of the bands. You can figure that out for yourself. Yes, indeed. So that's it's a very strange cartel. And I think if you were to try and link a band's, the fees they were getting paid, or are you making any more money than 10 years ago? Are you making any more money than 5 years ago? Now, as we project things forward with all the new costs, the answers are rather unlikely. So, what is there to prepare? Well, you need to fix your merch, fix your designs, have them in time to the printers, ready to ship on ship to day one of the tour. There are so many things that can go wrong. Day one is a kind of a nightmare. Some venues now, they want a percentage of your merch these days. Something which is very common in America. They just want 10% of what you're selling, pretty much for doing nothing. For me, as I mentioned before in the interview with Mikko from Swallow Sun, are different approaches. Everyone has their coping mechanisms, their way of doing things. For me, the singing is the most important thing. And so therefore, at least it has had to have become so. But the most important thing is sleeping. So I didn't really think about that much when I was younger. And there are tons of stories, as you can imagine, of nights spent up to no good and then singing a bit less perfect as you are simply tired. So respecting the fact you are not as young as you were, but that the voice is a muscle. Push it too far and you can strain it, you can pull it, and you can tear it. So the most important part of touring, I find, is knowing when to disappear, to shut up, to stay quiet, to take yourself off to bed, when to try and achieve some balance, have an experience, but go, okay, there's the balance on the other side. Increasingly, that experience has to become pulling off a great show and not pulling off a great party afterwards, or seeing something of an interesting city, a museum, or as my friend Adi from Solstafir puts it, morning and daytime living instead of nighttime living. Is there anything to be gained from dragging the ass out of every night? You just got to kind of quit that. My life hack for being on tour, sleeping pills. Some people smoke weed to relax. Sleeping on a nightliner is like being in a coffin. So if you are claustrophobic, you ain't going to like it. So for me, you have to sleep. So don't give my body any choice. It's just like, fuck you, go to sleep. As long as you don't come home with some form of dependency, I've taken sleeping pills, which I don't. Try and pick a bunk far from the party room. Also assess things like, where's the draft coming in? Where do people open and close the main door? Are you going to be near someone who snores? Indeed. All little tiny micro assessments. Earplugs are essential. Don't eat at night. If you fancy that kebab at 1 a.m. before starting the drive, don't forget you will need to take a huge shit around 10 a.m. and you'll wake up in a dark bus. The electricity will be off as the driver is most likely asleep and parked up. You get out, venue ain't open. Where do you go? Coffee shop? Where is there one near? Your phone isn't charged. Where's your shoes? Freezing cold. Ain't got no socks. Then someone stops you and wants to talk while you're a stinking, sweaty mess who just woke up, haven't had caffeine yet, and need to fix your makeup. Huh? And one of your stilettos is broken. Yes, rookie mistake. Filling up on late night junk. I tend to have a day bag, get in there quick, take a shower, find the coffee machine, hang up the stage clothes to dry, usually wet, horrible stinking leather, make alterations, dry them out, avoid talking, avoid everyone just yet until I've smashed everything with caffeine. But of course, caffeine is a diuretic, which can affect your voice, so you gotta be careful. But when I wake up on tour, I go, and if I can hum a note when I wake up, I'm going to be okay with singing. Sounds really silly, but it's true. And if I can stay quiet for the rest of the day, try and take a walk, or tour. My tour can easily become like living in a weird bubble and drive you nuts. You find out if you're really built for it or you aren't. If you're someone who considers themselves a home bird and needs your creature comforts, especially on a van tour, it won't be for you. Van tours are really what separates the men from the boys, as they say, changing into wet stage clothes at the side of every stage, having no personal space, trying to wash your balls in a sink, trying to find clean socks. Every piece of clothes you have at some stage is wet and stinking, sleeping shoulder to shoulder, and learning to sleep sitting up, constantly tired, alcohol, pour more natural depressants on the situation, or else you speed the motorhead way to try to wake up and move. Keep an eye on the driver when moving at night. But you know what? It's a beautiful experience on some level. The beauty of it is coping with adversity. It's pulling through. It's the feeling you have of that whole day working out, and you go, great show. That makes it all worth it. You really make friends touring you'll keep forever. At the same time, spent with each other. This time spent with each other is so intense. More or less every hour of every day. Van tour hack, put aside a few little extra dollars to try and have your own room in a cheap hotel every couple of days, to find some space, even a shitty place just for the brain. Audiobooks, find a few great ones to get into. I find I won't read a book much, but find an hour or two in a coffee shop without anyone else. Try and go to the gym or for a run. If you're going to drink every day for 3 or 4 weeks and you wonder why you're depressed, well, I think it's written on the backside of that bottle, isn't it? You got your reason. But again, at the end of the night, at the end of when all the singing, songing and dancing, I didn't say that right. Singing and song and dance is done. Come on, brain, let's go. Nothing really matches playing music in this environment. For me, it's the reward, the kind of the communal beauty of the whole thing. The reason why you put up with everything else, and I include being in the studio there, the agency, the movement, new experiences, new faces, new challenges, new blood, sweat and tears, taking a huge bite out of the moment. Personally, I like the pressure. And I'll finish with this kind of concept, and this is one that I really like. The stone that you drop in the still pool of writing that song ends up right here at the end of that, the ripples at the end of that night. And that journey of those ripples as they move outwards has involved the label, the pressing plants, the airlines, van companies, lighting people, tech people, crew people, the people on the door, bar staff, the people making you a bloody sandwich, the security whose hands you shake, the van drivers, the festival folks you meet every now and again, and of course the people who are moved enough by it to want to come to see you. That journey is all prompted by that one drop of that stone into that pool. And if you were lucky enough to have been able to take part in the dropping of that stone and reach the shore, shall we say, metaphorically, upon which those small waves crash, no matter how small they are in the grand scheme of all of this. To me, that's the journey. That's the moment where this all begins to make sense. And personally, I find that journey, and I don't use this word often, there's something magical about it. Yeah, I know, Alan, the word magic. But maybe we take that process for granted. But certainly the pressure the industry is under right now, and let's be clear, if we head towards, for example, climate change, lockdown, I know some of you are very skeptical about that idea, but I do feel we're being prepped for that on some level. I'll explain that maybe in another podcast. But I said before, of course, there's a discussion to be had about climate, and of course there is, who would deny that? But if it is going to be used as an example, for example, as an authoritarian measure to control movement, grant people individual carbon footprints linked to the social credit score, digital passports, digital money, i.e. the state says you can use this money we pay you, but only to spend on these things. Haven't you had that? 1.5 flights per year, etc., etc. As I said, all of these things linked to a social credit score, digital passports, then touring, going to festivals, moving, the agency involved in the music industry will clearly die. So will the scene. And no one cannot tell me that part of the pandemic was, of course, stress testing society for this meta context. Stay inside to save the world. Leave the dirty work of travelling to the very rich while you experience the world from behind your screen. Of course, Alan, I get it. The truth is grey. I'm not only here to scaremonger, but if the music industry is priced out of movement, all you will get is a sickly, sweet, nostalgic muck of a Springsteen show every year for €150. Don't say I didn't warn you. Getting in the van will be a thing of the past, my friends. That is Agitators Anonymous, episode 104. A midnight ramble across some life hacks for touring, some observations about touring, some this, that and the other. I will see you on the last tour before Doomsday. Over and out.